and welcome to the Happier Marriage Podcast, a podcast for spouses longing to have a happier marriage so they can feel more connected, desired, and supported. Now, to start the show, here is your host and Sherpa, licensed marriage and family therapist and certified relationship coach, Kingsley Grant.
Thanks for joining me on the Happier Marriage Secrets podcast. This is episode 34, and in this episode, I'll be sharing with you 5 underrated ways to bring physical intimacy back into your marriage today. And this is a theme for February based upon intimacy and physical connection. I hope you listened to episode 33, which we started this whole 4-part series. And so today is the second one, and we're going to talk about this one about physical intimacy. In episode 33, we spoke about emotional intimacy and how to have a safe space for that. So make sure that you listen to that if you have not yet listened to that episode. And make sure that when you do, subscribe to the show so you don't miss out on any of the future episodes that's coming up. Okay. So let me strongly encourage, like I said before, that you go back if you haven't and just, sit down and just take in all the episodes. Why not even do that on your, on your drive, on your walk? Make sure that I'm plugged into your earbud and, you have me in your ears. Okay. I look forward to hearing how that goes as well. Now, if you're listening to this for the first time, let me say this. You may not agree with all that you hear. And quite frankly, I don't truly expect you to, because at least you have your own opinion, your own thoughts about certain things, but you're going to hear me talk about things from a different perspective. And you might be triggered by some of what you'll hear on this episode. But remember, that's one of the purpose of this show, right? To stir things up and then take you in for what I call a solid landing. And you can always share your thoughts and about, what you're thinking, your comments, by sending us an email or commenting on this episode wherever you have access to comment on social media, but also on leaving a rating and a review on this podcast. Now, this show is brought to you by KingsleyGrant.com, and our hope is that you will be challenged, inspired, and encouraged in this episode as in every other episode. So stay tuned.
So, the big question is this. How is it possible that you have a happier marriage when you feel like you've tried everything? Your spouse isn't making an effort. You're exhausted. You feel like giving up. Or there's so much hurt that's taken place between you and your spouse. That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answers.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen of Happier Marriage World? I hope you're ready for another round of the Happier Marriage Secrets podcast. Today, as you heard, we're talking about the 5 underrated ways to bring physical intimacy back into your marriage today. Just to remind you that you can also watch a video episode of topics like this one on my YouTube channel at Kingsley Grant, KINGSLEYGRANT, Kingsley Grant. And make sure that when you do that, you smash that subscribe button, click on the like button and the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of the future video broadcast. That's very essential, very important that you do. So I'm looking forward to see you, and I want to hear from where I'm seated that you smashed that subscribe button. Okay. So looking forward to that. So you can also get shorter versions of some of the points that I make in these videos on TikTok, but also as well on YouTube Shorts. Okay. Now, before we get started in talking about the 5 underrated ways to bring physical intimacy back into your marriage today, let me just share with you some exciting news that if you haven't heard yet, which I hope that you have, but if you haven't, I am in the process of putting together a playing deck of cards for couples entitled Connect Strong. And these playing cards are basically a pack of cards like any, a bit larger than your regular playing cards, but it's designed to help you and your partner connect in deeper and more intimate way in a fun and conversational and way. Okay, so that's the whole idea behind these cards, and that is being worked on. And I'm going to have a special deal for you. So stay tuned, listen, because I'm going to open up a special opportunity for you to get those cards at a very discounted price. So that's enough that I'll say about that today. I'm also working on an ebook that's entitled Happier Marriage Secrets. Unlock the secrets that reignite passion and intimacy into your marriage, even if it's struggling right now. So as you can see, there are a lot of things going on in my world, and I want to make sure you get a special gift for just listening to me and, of course, listen to this podcast at the end of this episode. So make sure whatever you do, stick around to the end and hear how to get the gift. Again, let me simply say thanks for joining me for this episode. As you already heard, we're talking about the 5 underrated ways to bring physical intimacy back into your marriage today. Now, this is a very tricky topic, as you can imagine, because many times when you're having some issues, you're struggling in your relationship. It's one of the reasons why physical intimacy may not be what it should be. And maybe that's an area of concern. Maybe it is the reason because there's underlying issues. And you say, Kingsley, how can I then start with physical intimacy? Well, maybe it's the thing to do to get you back on track, right? So if you're listening to me and you've never heard me before, and you may have wondered, stumbled upon this podcast, you're wondering, who am I? Well, I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I've counseled hundreds of couples over the past several years, and also as a certified relationship coach. And from what I've experienced through my professional experience, but also as in my personal experience as a husband who's been married for almost 4 decades. So I think I have some confidence in talking about topics like this, and I hope you'll hear that in when I share about these 5 underrated ways. Now, like I mentioned, that sometimes it's a bit tricky. It's a tricky dance, right? Because this is sometimes the last thing couples, when they present and they come into a counseling, they will tell me the reason why they are lacking intimacy in their physical intimacy in their marriage, because they just are not connecting, especially for the wife. If you are a wife listening to this, you ever had those moments, you probably can agree with what I'm saying, because this makes sense to you. Because I find that it's harder for a wife to truly get to the area of physical intimacy in her relationship, right? In your relationship, if you're listening as a wife, because it's more than just the physical. There's the emotional connection. It's mental. So if you feel like you're emotionally disconnected, it's going to be very difficult for you. And this may be the last thing that you want to do, is to create anything of a physical intimacy in nature, right? So I want to put that as a backdrop in sharing these 5 underrated ways with you, because I want to take that into consideration and not be aware, right? And be inconsiderate of that aspect of what might be going on in your world. So here's the first of the 5 underrated ways that I have listed here. And the reason why I mention underrated, because sometimes they are very obvious. Sometimes it's something you've heard before, but it seems as if it's it's counterintuitive, because you're having these issues, and then to schedule some things or do some things that are physical in nature, you're thinking that, well, but if I'm not feeling it, how am I going to do it, right? If I'm not feeling it, how am I going to do it? Well, sometimes one of the terms we use is act your way into what it is you want. And people may say, isn't that like fake it until you make it? Well, the difference here of faking it until you make it is almost like you feel forced in doing something, right? There's not that intentionality. It's not that you want to get to that place. So it sounds so unreal. So if I say act or behave your way into what you want, then it's very intentional. It's very not only direct, but it's very well thought out. It's very well, it's given some time and effort in thinking about what it is you want in your relationship. So when I mention here, schedule weekly date nights with no distraction, right? And I have date nights. If you see me here, date nights is in air quotes. So schedule weekly date nights with no distractions. This is so important because what happened is when you're going through issues in your relationship, even scheduling something seems like a weighty matter. It seems like it's something that you may not want to do right now. It may be the last thing on your mind, right? But just scheduling that in is one act. It's almost like behaving your way into the place you want to get. We got to start somewhere, no matter where we are in our marriages. We've got to start somewhere, and someone have to lead in this regard. So dedicating time to just the two of you. If you have children, you've got to find a way to not have the children be a part of this, right? I know some couples, they almost like cannot do anything without their children because they are so connected, or the kids serve as a safe space for them. And so when you're going to schedule this, I'm recommending that you do that without any children, just the two of you. And if possible, as much as possible, disconnect from technology so you can be fully present. It's amazing how I've seen people supposedly out on date nights, and I must be very honest here. I'm guilty of this myself sometimes, where I will be on my phone. I'm out, but yet I'm on my phone and checking things, scrolling through whatever it is. Yet we are out on a date night. And, we're both guilty, myself and my wife. We're guilty of this. And I see this is true for a lot of relationships. It's amazing. Just if you ever want to experiment with this, when you go out, look around. If you're in a restaurant, for example, look around how families are spending their time, how couples are spending their time. Unless they're brand new at this, they're just like getting to know each other, then you can tell how, you can tell relationships based upon how they're gazing into each other's eyes, how they're like, holding hands and just giddy, right? So those are the times it's very rare, not very rare, but you'll see that less. But for the most part, when you're in a relationship for some time, this becomes a distraction. You want to minimize, reduce, or eliminate all aspects of distractions because you're trying to reconnect. So you're going to talk about things. And this is where my cards I'm creating, Connect Strong, will truly be very, very helpful because how the card is designed, you have a question that is really kind of non-volatile, right? It's a non-nuclear question. And it allows you to have conversations around lighter matters, but to get to know each other and ask fun questions and interactive questions so that you can have a dialogue. That's the kind of thing it's also created for times like this, where you can have, topics of conversation that you may not be able to come up with on your own. You're struggling to come up with what can we talk about? Well, that's what the card is intended for. But because you don't have that yet, we got to find something in the meantime. But if you is in that situation, make sure you look out for, and that's why you want to subscribe to this show so you can hear when it's ready and is available to you to be able to have that. So schedule weekly date nights is the first thing I want to mention. Number 2 is share your deepest fears, right? And hopes and dreams with each other. It's amazing sometimes when I ask couples, I said, how often do you talk about your dreams and your fears? I know from a husband's standpoint, from a man's standpoint, sometimes it's difficult. We don't talk about our fears too much because it allows us to become too vulnerable and possibly feeling weak if we're sharing about what we fear about the future. Because I can tell you from a man's perspective, there are things that scare us. There are things that we have fear around that we may not talk about too much because we want to look strong. We want to look like we've got it together because we think that is one of those attractive qualities that we have as men. And so we try to make certain we project that as much as possible. So what I'm suggesting here about sharing your deepest fears and hopes and dreams with each other is going to allow you to open up and be vulnerable. And that's why I talk about in episode 33 about emotional intimacy, about vulnerability. This is so necessary, but it's one of those ways you're going to bring back physical intimacy because you're going to connect around the emotional aspect by talking about these things, which tend to draw you closer. you're tending to hear, you'll tend to hear or talk about things that you've kept at, maybe at arm's length from your spouse. By doing this, it can begin to lead, and that's why it's so underrated and it may counterintuitive, but it does lead to physical intimacy, right? Because as you know, if you're as a wife listening, when you're feeling very emotionally connected with your husband, it is something that opens you up and make you a better receptor of an initiation on your husband's part for physical intimacy. And it may not be sexual. And maybe as a husband, your wife may want to lead, maybe hug you and hold your hand. And those also are ways to show that, which I'll mention in a few moments. So share your deepest fears, hopes, and dreams. Number 3, engage in physical intimacy regularly. Now, again, I say physical intimacy, which could include, right? It could include sexual intimacy, but it doesn't have to always be that. It's amazing sometimes if you are not wired, part of your personality, and physical touch is not your love language, how you actually engage, then you might find this a bit tricky because you may not even think about when you're out with your wife or with your husband to hold his or her hand, right? Or, just when you're laying down or sitting together to cuddle, because it's not your love language. And sometimes you have to make an effort, or I would even say a sacrifice. I call it a sacrifice because it's something that it goes counter to who you are and how you normally do relationships. So at night, for example, when you're sleeping, maybe cuddling, maybe as you're watching television, sitting close. Now, I know, again, these are things I'm talking about, but it's not, because I too have experienced where I had to make an effort. It's very intentional. It has to be it's not just something that comes so natural for people like myself if physical touch or affection is not our love language, right? So, all right, if you're a wife and that's true about you as well, and I know it happens to some wives, that's not, they don't really necessarily, I know of a relationship where the husband is more the hugger. He's more the affectionate one. And the wife is like, I don't like it. It's too much sometimes, so get off me, and jokingly. But that's in essence what she's saying. She's not that type, but she shows her love and her concern for her husband in many ways. But it's just not that is not the major area. So this may take some work on your part to be able to do this, to engage in physical intimacy, just without even anything leading to a sexual intimacy. Because these are some things that, again, those touch points then make you feel as if the person really is into you and makes you feel special and make you feel like someone of value, because the idea of not even feeling like your husband or your wife wants to touch you, it's kind of hard sometimes, right? Because you're thinking, man, he doesn't even want to touch me. And you start thinking, is there something wrong with me? Is it that am I overweight now, or I don't look as sexy or as attractive to him or to her as I once did? And you start questioning those things, because when you're not engaged and you're not doing these things, the question mark comes up in your head, wondering why, especially if it was a part of your relationship before. Now, if this has always been the way the relationship have interacted, then of course you want to change that dance. You want to do something more and not continue that forever. But it's going to take some work, of course, on your both parts. Number 4, create shared experiences and memories, right? This is one of those things that I think myself and my wife has done as a couple, and been doing that in our latter years. I would say the last several years, recent years, is creating these experiences, like traveling. And there's a time we were not able to. We just really didn't have the wherewithal to travel. I mean, we would love to, we love to travel. Both of us love to travel and go to, on adventurous trips and try new activities and so on, build new memories, right? In where we go out to eat or whatever it might look like. But sometimes we were in a time where we could not afford that. We just didn't have the wherewithal to do those things. And that may be you. And so it becomes very difficult, very challenging sometimes to be able to do those things. And so, but you're creating those shared experiences and memories are so important, for this idea of being able to build, to bring physical intimacy back into your marriage today. And I know it's going to be work. Yes, it may feel awkward. Yes, it may not feel natural. Yes, to all those things. But again, it's really the intention, the goal is to somehow reignite and to, bring physical intimacy back into your marriage. And these may, of course, take you into those areas of awkwardness, awkward feeling, of whatever it may look like. But that is important to do that. Then we're going to get to the fifth one, but let me just mention the first four I've covered so far. Schedule weekly date nights, share your deepest fears, hopes, and dreams, engage in physical intimacy, and create shared experiences and memories. Now, before I get to number 5, let me remind you that you want to leave me a rating and review, and I will tell you more about that at the end of this episode as well. But also to make sure that you get caught up, right? You get caught up on listening to the past episodes. And really, if you've missed one, you want to kind of, especially these series I'm doing in January and February. And if you're listening to this is 2023, but you may not have to, I don't want to put a date stamp by saying, I'm just saying that to you, but this is important that you kind of get caught up. And I just want to give you a reference point to know where you are in listening. And so you don't miss any of this past future episodes. That's why if you subscribe to the show, you won't miss any of the future episodes. Now we're going to get to number 5. So we've covered the first 4. Now the 5th one is practice gratitude and appreciation towards each other. This is one of those that's very much underrated, because here's what I find you might or others have in my own experience as a therapist. When I mention sometimes this idea of practicing gratitude and appreciation, somehow the connection is not made. They're wondering, what does that have to do with physical intimacy? Well, a lot. Because imagine when you as a spouse feels appreciated, it goes a long way. It does allow you to feel acknowledged and that what you've done is seen. You feel seen in the relationship. So it's a way to kind of get connected at a very low level, if this is an area you want to start, right? Because it significantly improves intimacy over time. Because you start noticing that your spouse is appreciating you. So the connection of what you do and who you are is almost like this become very enmeshed. Because when he or she is simply saying, thank you, I really appreciate that, you feel as if they're appreciating you as a person, and you should feel that way. It's quite okay. And so on the road towards physical intimacy, this idea of starting with, I would say, the low level entry, where it's a bit less, maybe even starting here could be the way you want to start this whole building physical intimacy or bringing physical intimacy back into your marriage starting today. This is one of those things that you could do right away. So if I was to flip this 5 and say, start with this first one, this might be the place to, at an entry level, into this road back to physical intimacy. Now, these 5, again, I want to cover these 5 again. Schedule weekly date nights with no distractions. Share your deepest fears, hopes, and dreams with each other. Engage in physical intimacy regularly, and I described that earlier. Create shared experiences and memories, and then practice gratitude and appreciation towards each other. And just pay attention to what difference this make and what is making for you as you attempt, as you endeavor, as you put into practice these things I'm mentioning. I'd love to hear your thoughts on these 5 underrated ways. Which of these 5 really resonated most with you? Where in your area of physical intimacy, as you try to build or bring that back, Which of these 5 would you say would be more appropriate for you to start, and why? We'd love to hear from you. So make sure that you connect with us and leave a comment in the comments, in the review and rating, or if you follow us on social media and any portion of this is posted, please leave a comment there as well so I can hear what your thoughts are and that you listen to this episode. Now, my friend, again, remember, as I said earlier at the very beginning, by staying to the end of this episode, I want to give you a free gift. And that is, the announcer will tell you how to get the free gift that I have prepared especially for you and for listening throughout this episode. And of course, it's a free ebook on 5 secrets to your happier marriage, the roadmap to the marriage you've always wanted and so deserve. Now, before she comes, let me invite you to check out our new website at happiermarriagesecrets.com, happiermarriagesecrets.com, where you will find all the podcasts that you need to, sit down and just, the word is escaping me what I want to say. Well, when you hear the word binge, just binge listen on all the episodes, and make sure you subscribe to the show so you can get all the new episodes notification of that. And you can also read our blog posts that are also on that page as well. So thanks again for listening, my friend. And the announcer will now come and tell you how to get your free gift, as I promised. And so with that in mind, let's make marriages happier again. With that said, my friend, peace out. God bless you. And I'll see you on the next episode. So here's the announcer will come and tell you how to get your free gift.
We've come to the end of another exciting show, and if you enjoyed this podcast, 1. Make sure you give this show a rating and review. 2. Subscribe to the show to get all new releases. And 3. Get your complimentary copy of the 5 Secrets to a Happier Marriage ebook at kingsleygrant.com/HMS ebook. Again, it's kingsleygrant.com/HMS ebook. See the link in the show notes. Do it today. Don't delay. Thanks so much for listening, and make sure you tell one other spouse about this show, or better yet, share it with them. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. May he turn his face toward you and give you his peace, both now and forever.